Whenever you want to manage queries, you'll find that on the Home tab, there's actually a Manage button. And this Manage button allows you to delete a query, the one you've got selected, duplicate it, or create a new query that references it. So I want to show you how we use these. I also want to show you how you use some of the buttons on the transform, such as Transpose, Reverse, and Count. Let's start first of all by making a duplicate of sales by region. Now when it comes to making a duplicate, just check first of all that you don't have a total row. If you have a total row as your last row, then delete it. Now to duplicate this query, you could right click and you can go duplicate, or you can go to the Home tab and go Manage and choose duplicate. If I wanted to then delete it, I could go to Manage and delete it, and delete. Or another way that I tend to prefer to make a duplicate of a query is just Control-C to copy and Control-V to paste. You can of course right click and copy and paste as well, and you can delete and rename and duplicate and reference queries just with the right click method. Now I want to rename this query, so I'm actually preferring the F2 approach, and I want to call it Regional Sales. So I've duplicated the regional sales query. Now, when I last worked with it, I actually repivoted it, and so now I want to unpivot it. So I'm going to click 2020, hold the Shift key and click 2022. I'm going to go to the Transform tab, and I want to unpivot this particular group of columns. So I click this button here, Unpivot Columns. And then I'm going to click Attribute, press F2, call this Year, and I'm going to click Value and press F2 and call this Sales. So I've unpivoted that query again. Now what I want to do is show you how you could reverse the rows in a table. If I click on Region, that's what this button here does. On the Transform tab, I can reverse the rows and basically put Whakatane at the top. And if I reverse it again, I'll put Auckland at the top. And if I want to tidy up my queries, I could just delete that step and delete that step. So that's how the reverse rows work. Now what I'd like to do is show you how the merge columns work, this button here. I'm going to click on Region, Control click Year, you can use the Shift key, and I want to merge those two columns into one column. So I use the Transform. I merge columns, and the separator I want to use between the actual name of the region and the year is a space. So I choose space, so you can choose any separator you want. And I'm going to call it Region and Year. And so it won't add a column, it'll transform these two columns into one column called Region and Year as soon as I go OK. And there's the region, a space, and then the year. So that's how the merge columns work. So you can merge stuff together using this button here if it comes to you separated in different columns. Now we've got 33 rows here. If I was to use the Transpose button, I'll end up with 33 columns. So if I click Transpose, you can see that it's actually switched it from being rows to being columns. If I then wanted to lift the first row so they became column headings, I would go to Home and I would use first row as headers. And that lifts that up to become the first row. Okay, now let me show you how you create a query that references another query. If I go to the Manage button and choose Reference, I have created a query that's referencing the regional sales. I actually now want to call this, rename this, F2, Total Sales Figure. And I really just want to know what was the total sales. And so I'm actually going to turn around and count the rows. So Transform, count rows. But it only gives me one. So I'm going to delete that step. And I'm actually going to go back to regional sales. And I actually need to transpose this back to being actually columns. So I transform, transpose, so it goes back to being a column. Then I go to my sales figures. That's automatically been reflected in here because they're linked. And I count the rows. And basically it tells me there's 33 records in the regional sales. And so that's what the Count Rows button does.